Welcome, everyone, to another version of Storytelling with James Undefined. And this is Duff McKagan performing I Fought the Law and the Law Won at La Passion Rouge in New York City. This is the most recent concert I have seen with one of the members of Guns N' Roses, and it was absolutely spectacular. I've been fortunate enough to see Slash with Miles Kennedy, Axl with AC/DC, Axl with his solo band, Slash with the Blues Balls, and Slash solo. Not to mention all the guys minus Axl and Velvet Revolver, where Slash, Duff, Matt Sorum, even Izzy helped write it, but I didn't see him, performed with Velvet Revolver and the former lead singer of Stone Temple Pilots, Wayland. So all these pictures in the background are pictures I took at various shows that I saw. Back in the day, I definitely didn't take as many pictures, so there is quite a few shows, especially the Velvet Revolver, Axel solo projects, where I just didn't take pictures because back in those days, we really didn't have the same cameras on cell phones, and it was kind of a joke taking pictures on them because they just didn't turn out very good, so why bother taking them? So these are probably all more in the last 5 years or so pictures. So let me back up here. How did I first get into Guns N' Roses, and why did I get to the stage where I was willing to travel to different countries, different cities to see members of Guns N' Roses perform? Well, I was a young kid and I was riding the school bus, and the older kids would play their provocative music, and that meant Guns N' Roses. And I remember hearing it at the back of the bus, and I remember one day they even invited me back to sit with all the cool older kids, and they're like, I have a song for you. Now, they had been playing Guns N' Roses the entire time, but I remember them putting on a song, and it was actually a cover of an Aerosmith song, but it was Guns N' Roses' version. And right off the bat, all you hear is Axel screaming, I have a song for your effing mother. And like that, that seared into my head and became my first real memory of Guns N' Roses. But as all young kids, you get exposed to multiple bands, multiple music, and I really didn't know where my music taste stood. So fast forward multiple years, and I've gone through different genres of music. I loved rap. I loved a bunch of different musics, styles. And I go over to a friend's house, and he had just gotten a double album of Guns N' Roses, Use Your Illusions 1 and Use Your Illusions 2. Now, at this point, I'm in high school, and music is becoming a much larger part of my life. I'm starting to listen to the radio station. I'm starting to listen to more diverse music, not just what my friends told me. And a lot of my friends were into rap and dance at this point because the 90s were just full of different genres of music. And he put on Use Your Illusions 2. And right off the bat, between Civil War and Yesterday and Knock Knock Knocking on Heaven's Door, I was hooked. And he made me a copy of that tape and the other tape as far as Use Your Illusions 1. And I listened to that album non-stop. And I played it on my Walkman from and to school every single day. I played it in the evening. And finally, I wanted my own actual copy. And I just got my first CD player, and I was so excited. So I joined what all kids in the 90s did, the music clubs, where you could basically buy 20 CDs for a penny, but then you had to buy, like, I don't know, let's exaggerate and say 50 CDs afterwards. And I requested Use Your Illusions 1, 2, and Appetite as my very first CDs coming from this music supplier. I believe it was Columbia. Notably, on that group of CDs that came in from Columbia House, I also got Nirvana's Nevermind, so it was a really good haul. But Appetite for Destruction was the album I wanted to listen to because I had the others on tape. I had listened to them a million times, but Appetite for Destruction I didn't have. So I ripped that open as soon as I saw it and I put it in my CD player and I started playing it. And the moment Appetite for Destruction came on, I was just blown away. Yes, I had heard it 100 times before. I had heard it from the older kids. I'd heard it around school. I had heard it in multiple other places, but I had never had a copy of my own. And I was so excited to have my copy of Welcome to the Jungle. And it just kept getting better as I started to listen to the other songs. Now, I was super excited to get any information Guns N' Roses, anything I could absorb, going over to a friend's house that had cable TV because I didn't have cable TV, and watching Much Music at the time and getting to see all their songs charting at number one on Much Music. And the only times they would get knocked out of number one is if another Guns N' Roses song came in and took that number one spot, and they would be knocked down to number two. And it was spectacular. I was in heaven. The only thing that could damper that was the fact that I wasn't allowed to go see them in concert. I don't understand why a band that was full of controversy for things like peeing on a plane and drug and alcohol abuse would upset a parent, but for some reason, those things upset my parents, and I wasn't allowed to go see them. So that was a definite downer. And at that age, I couldn't exactly go see them by myself because I couldn't even drive, but I really wanted to see Guns N' Roses. But the tour came and the tour left, and I didn't get to see them. And then they put out Spaghetti Incident and were announcing that they were taking a little break, and that was just a filler album. But that filler album was pretty much the end, as the only thing that came out after that was a song for a movie. Notably, that song was a cover song of Sympathy for the Devil by the Rolling Stones. I enjoyed it a lot. It takes a lot of heat because everyone loves the original, but that's my version of Sympathy for the Devil because it's Guns N' Roses. But shortly after that, all you started hearing was Slash was leaving the band and Duff was leaving the band, and then Gilby Clarke was getting fired, and just all this negative stuff. And my dream of seeing Guns N' Roses seemed over. It would take 10 years for Axl to actually put out an album with his solo version of Guns N' Roses, but it wasn't the same. Yes, I listened to it, and yes, I enjoy a lot of the songs, but it just wasn't the same. But in that time, Slash would put out albums on his own. So would Izzy and Gilby Clarke, and I would get all of their albums. And, there are some songs on all of them that I quite liked, especially Slash's. But none of them could fill the gap. But Velvet Revolver, which was most of the members of Guns N' Roses, minus Mr. Axl Rose, would put out an album with Scott Weiland, and that was great. I was so happy. There were so many great songs. I believe Slither was one of the first songs that came out for it. Fall to Pieces, to me, was the best song on the album by far. And I was definitely looking forward to lots of albums from Velvet Revolver. Unfortunately, Scott's drug problems came to a head, and that came to an end. But I got to see them twice. And even before Axl's solo Guns N' Roses album came out, he was starting to tour again. So I finally got to see Guns N' Roses, at least a version of Guns N' Roses. And I remember being so excited, but again, the very first show Axl didn't show up for, and of course, that ended in disaster in that town. So when they finally got to Toronto, I was pumped, but I was not surprised that he wasn't there. And it was about 10:30, 11 o'clock, and everyone was just looking at each other, thinking to themselves, is he bailing on Toronto like he bailed on Vancouver? And luckily, he finally came out. and he performed. And I was super happy to finally see Guns N' Roses, see all my favorite songs. It did seem like it wasn't right because at that point he had his like dread phase, and it just didn't feel right not having Slash on stage. And it was enjoyable, but you could tell he was also kind of getting back into shape because there was a lot of little breaks. But to my enjoyment, he came back several times over the next couple of years, and each show got better and better and better. I will say there's two shows that in my mind I've kind of blended together, but when I've looked back on the dates and I've looked back on the events, it actually was over two different shows. My absolute favorite experience was going down to Toronto and seeing Sebastian Bach opening up for them, and the Trailer Park Boys were also there, and they had just came out with an album called Liquor and Whores, and they played their song Liquor and Whores during Sebastian's set, I believe. They also had these girls called the Suicide Girls that came out and danced and filled time while we waited for Axel. After waiting for Axel once before, I actually really appreciated that now they've gotten to the point where they realize Axel's going to be late. So they literally just brought dancers to throw on stage to keep you occupied and not thinking about the fact that Axel's not on stage yet. That being said, when Axel did get on stage, which was actually more timely than the first time I saw him, he actually performed at a much higher rate after he'd been singing now for a couple of years and getting back into the groove. And I thought it was one of the best performances on his part I had seen. And it was really neat because there was a moment, and I'm pretty sure it was Don't Cry, where Bubbles and the crew came out and sang with Axel. And that was pretty neat. Another moment with Don't Cry that I thought was pretty neat was from one of the concerts. I don't know which one, where they used that song to just play instrumental while Axel took a break, and the crowd sang the entire version of Don't Cry perfectly, and I was so impressed. I've seen crowds do that in the past, but not usually the entire song without the lead singer even on stage, and that was super impressive. And out of the four or five times I saw Axel's solo version of Guns N' Roses, I believe it was the last one where he had a band called The Pretty Reckless open for him. And I'll be honest, nobody in the crowd knew who this girl was that came out on stage. And she did such a phenomenal job. I was blown away with how good a job she did. It was the first time I ever walked out of a concert, went to my car, and downloaded the Openers album and listened to it all the way home. And I know the crowd didn't know who she was prior to going on because everyone was talking about, hey, who's the opener? And the massive consensus among the fans was, who cares who's the opener? We're here to see Axel. So the fact that she came and blew everyone away and nobody was really there to see her, I thought was pretty incredible. I will say it was kind of funny. There was a DJ on a local station months prior, kind of ripping into this actress that was giving up her day job to become a rock star. And he was basically, the rock community won't accept her, that just wanting to pretend to be a rocker, and she should probably stay and focus on her acting career. And nobody from her show, which was Gossip Girl, was going to follow her over to rock music because it's very different genres. Well, I remembered that, and I realized afterwards who this was that I had just seen, and that stuck with me. And a couple months later, I happened to hear him on the radio saying, "Hey, I might have mentioned that she shouldn't become a rock star because people won't accept her." He's like, "I was wrong. She's amazing, and she is incredible live." And yes, I know I just went off on a tangent about another band, but I will say the opener sometimes set up how you feel during the actual main event. And she did such a great job. That to me is also a Guns N' Roses memory. Even though it's not Guns N' Roses, it was part of the Guns N' Roses show. and that made that evening even better. And Axel was spectacular that evening as well. And while these years of Axel's solo Guns N' Roses band was going on, I was getting to see Slash with Miles Kennedy quite often, and it was great. It was great because you could get floor tickets for under $100 and just walk right up to the front, see Axel or Slash nice and close, and get to enjoy them and enjoy the music. And each one would play a different version of some of the classic songs, or different song choices, I should say. And getting to see more songs because you would get to see them separate was really, really nice. And that's one of the things I liked about seeing Duff recently, was I actually got to see another song from Guns N' Roses that I had never seen live, because he chose to play a song that doesn't get played when they tour together. Another little side tangent that I'm going to take here. While I got up nice and close, I do have two very dramatic memories. One of the Axel shows with Guns N' Roses, there was a group of guys like me, all 6 feet tall, big guys, and a group of smaller ladies. And we basically, even though most people were all strangers, formed a U around these ladies. And a whole bunch of guys tried ramming their way through. And all the big guys basically said, "Nope, you're not getting through," and let the ladies enjoy their show, especially because they were shorter than the group of guys that were kind of creating a bit of a U around them. We didn't care because we could see right over top of them, but they kind of got protected, and there was a lot of guys that got kind of thrown out of the area because they were trying to break in and just barge their way through these ladies. And I thought that was really nice of the crowd to protect them. And it was almost the exact type of situation, but at this time it was Slash and Miles Kennedy playing at the Rebel in Toronto. And I was up close to the front, and this guy, totally drunk, came barging up and hit this lady that was in front of me, that I didn't mind her being in front of me. And he hit her hard, and I might have thrown him out of the area, said, "Nope, you can stay back there." And he came back and tried to hit me. And at this point, the security guards were all starting to pay attention. So even though I had tossed him out originally, I could see the security guards seeing that the commotion was going on. So I let the guy kind of push and shake me a little bit. And I just was looking straight at the security guards, kind of like, "Hey, what's up? Are you going to deal with this?" And originally, the security guards were like, "You're both out." But the entire group of fans around defended me and said, "No, he defended that lady. He needs to stay, and this guy needs to go." And the security guards listened to him. And I'm super happy because I also was thinking, I'm about to get kicked out of my favorite artist. And this sucks because the show had just started. But I got to stay, and it was all thanks to the crowd around me for sticking up for me. And I can't remember exactly when it was, but I remember at some point just happened to see an interview with Slash, and the interviewer asked him a question about Axel, and Slash actually shut it down and was kind of like, "Hey, we're actually friends again." And then immediately the guy interviewing started to do some follow up questions like, "Hey, relax. We just started talking to each other. Don't start planning the reunion." But as fans, we all wanted that reunion. So when they actually announced that there was a reunion coming, and they didn't just announce that they were going to do one or two shows, they kind of announced right off the bat that there was a chance that there was going to be multiples. I got so excited that I was finally going to get to see the original version altogether, or as many members as possible. I will say, when I first got that opportunity to see the original band all back together, I was a little shocked at first at the prices, which I shouldn't have been, but just because I had been able to walk right up to the front on so many occasions and see both Axel and Slash for like $100 or less, I was a little blown away that that same kind of price would get me nosebleeds now. So it is a little bittersweet. My very first experience, I went to the side stage a little bit too much, so I didn't get to see all of the pyro and the different light show and stuff like that they had going on. So I have gone a little more center stage the last several times I've seen them, just to get a better view of this show. but you do lose out in getting to see them up close and personal. So that's what's really nice about getting to see this last year in particular, Slash with the Blues Balls, because again, right up front, a couple rows from him. Same thing with seeing Duff McKagan and his solo band this year. There was like 6 people in front of me before him, and that is just so spectacular to still kind of get some of that intimate feeling with some of these artists that are just absolutely huge and have huge fan bases. I will add, shortly after they had reunited, there was a issue with AC/DC, and Johnson unfortunately was having some hearing issues, and they needed someone to help finish the concert tour that they were on, and Axel stepped in to help with that. And there was no Toronto show because AC/DC had already done Toronto at that point when he came in. So I had looked at the options, and there was a Buffalo and a show in Cleveland. And I thought it would be more fun to go to Cleveland. Buffalo's closer, but I just thought it would be more fun to go to Cleveland. So I jumped in a car, drove down to the border. Of course, the guy at the border was like, I've never heard of such a show. But he was going to let me go through, but he did ask me one other question because he was looking in the back of my truck, and he was like, why do you have a sleeping bag there? And I just looked at him like, there's a very good chance I'm going to fall asleep on the way back, so I might want to pull over and have a sleep. And he's like, I guess that's a good point. So after giving me a hard time about my sleeping bag, he let me through. I made my way down to Cleveland, went and checked out the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which Guns N' Roses had recently gotten into. And I went and I checked out the displays towards them, and then went to the concert. And it was absolutely fantastic. I'm a huge AC/DC fan, and even though Guns N' Roses is my favorite band, I will say there was a show in '96 where AC/DC gave me the best concert I ever saw in my entire life, as well as they absolutely stole the show when they came back and played SARS Fest many years later. Now, the guys are quite a bit older at this point when I'm seeing this concert, and Axel's stepping in, but I thought it was a great show. I was so impressed. And all but one song, I thought Axel sounded really good doing the step in for them. There was one song at the end I was like, ooh, that's definitely much better with Brian Johnson, but Axel did a great job. I enjoyed the show, and AC/DC was amazing as always. Some of the other former members, like Izzy, do have solo albums, but he doesn't really tour or tour up here at least with any of that material. So I probably won't ever get to see him, but seeing Duff, which was incredible, and he just stole the room, and everyone could just feel his presence when he walked in. And Slash, like, who can put out an album that doesn't even fit in their genre by putting out a blues album and then selling out an arena as a guitar player? Like, maybe some lead singers can do that kind of stuff, but how many guitar players can literally just be like, I'm gonna do a different genre, put out an album, and I'm still gonna sell out a large arena or stadium? Like, that's just insane, the talent and the presence that all of these guys have. And I did say it in one of my other videos, but I mentioned earlier about how they were the bad boys of rock and roll, and there was so much controversy around them early on. But time changes things, and if you look back on things, the 80s and 90s, there's so many creeps that came out of the 80s and 90s, like Bill Cosby, and there's just so many, you could just read them off forever. It's amazing that the bad boys of the 80s and 90s and Guns N' Roses are all actually upstanding citizens, and they've all gotten sober, and they've all kind of turned their lives around, and they're very much role models now comparatively to where they were. And obviously, I've just shared a lot of stories about how I was introduced to Guns N' Roses, and then kind of shared stories about my experiences going to see Guns N' Roses shows, which is all one element. But the same thing that happens to all of us is music brings us back to a place and a time and an emotion and a memory. And for me, Guns N' Roses is one of those bands when I'm feeling really good, I like to listen to. And when I'm feeling down, they're the first band I go and I reach and I grab. and I'll put on some of my favorite Guns N' Roses songs, and my mood will help cheer me up and bring me around when I'm feeling a little bit down. And that's the true testament to any band that we love and we feel an emotion towards. And when you feel that emotion and it can bring you up, and it doesn't necessarily bring you down just because you use it when you're down sometimes, but you can also listen to it when you're extremely happy, and it just gives you pleasant memories. And if it doesn't matter if it's a memory about discovering Guns N' Roses, seeing one of their openers like the Pretty Reckless. I was honestly very impressed with the Pretenders as well when I saw them open up for Guns N' Roses on the most recent show that I saw with them. It gives you that emotion. It makes you feel happy, and that's what's important. And I'm going to just leave you off with a little bit of a song here, and I hope you have a band that makes you as happy as Guns N' Roses has always made me. I really hope you enjoyed my story of Guns N' Roses and what they have meant to me. And if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and check out my other stories.